Hello. There's a day. Let's see if everybody else comes in. Okay. I could go ahead and start. This is Halloween night. It's the spooky night of the year. What we're going to do tonight is going to tell ghost stories or other type of scary, spooky stories. Some of it's true. There's some made up for this time. Some true cases of missing people. We're going to talk about tell stories about ghosts, Bigfoot, monsters, aliens, you name it. Since this is the night we tell the stories. Now, one thing we're going to start off with is is the story about Jack, who's a marine biologist. Him and his group his group are going out to do a night dive. So they went out to the middle of the bay, which is North American off the coast of Canada. It's a cold, chilly night as they travel on the boat towards the spot that they're going to dive on with the for the night dive. They look over the maps, look over the details that they're going to dive on. They discuss with each other what to do and what role of each one of them do. So they got their stuff planned out. They gathered the stuff to take samples and all that. Got cameras ready in their dive gear and all that. Once they got to the spot to do the dive, they got ready, put on their diving gear. They wore vulcanized dry suits to keep them warm with warm undergarments and all that. So they got their gear put on, and one by one they jumped into the water. They dove down 50 feet to where they're going to take samples and that with lights on and all that. They Jack went his little way to the left to do his thing to gather samples and everything like that. Then he stopped when he was doing gathering his samples. He felt something like somebody's watching him or something. He looked around, but his lights can't penetrate the dark so fast as far as it could. It's dark, but he had that eerie feeling that something is watching him. So he went back to work, gathering stuff, wrote down notes, took some pictures, get his samples. Hi, Linda. Yeah, I was going to do this earlier. 8 p.m. Central Time, but with the wrestling going on, as Jack took pictures and samples from the sand and all that, and wrote down about the ant creatures that he saw and took the pictures of that. As he was putting stuff away in his pouch and on his dry suit, he felt something wrapped around him, a large tentacle that's kind of like this around thickness. It hooked onto him so tightly that wrapped him up. The second coil wrapped up around his thighs and raced to hold him. He was being wrapped up so tight. His lights were showing, but as he flipped until he finally see a giant sea creature, big mouth ready to open. It had a sharp like beaks, and with one jerk, he went flying through the water into the gaping mouth of the Kraken, and he was ever seen again. What do you think of that story, Melinda? Yeah, scary monster movies for sure. Yeah. Next one is the gonna give you nightmares tonight, Melinda. next one, next story is the thing in the woods. Jeff is a survivalist and a hunter. So he grabbed his shotgun and got his hunting gear on, and he's usually do solo hunting and all that, but he has a cell phone just in case he needs in case he needs to contact somebody. So he drove from his home to to where the area that his grandfather owned the land, nestled against the mountain scenery with lots of woods, a small creek running through the property, and the creek leads down to a small lake to the south. When he got to his grandfather's cabin, he don't he don't do like tree stand hunting and all that. He would like to stalk his prey. So as he put his items and gears away in the cabin, he brewed some coffee, drank drank it down straight, fixed him a snack, and ate it and drank some water before he set out to do a solo hunt. He's going to be there for a few days. So, his grandfather has food in the cabin and all that. So he after he finished eating and drinking, he got his hunting gear on and put on the scent spray to hide his scent so that what he's stalking, the deer won't smell him if a comes up and all that. He head out and went to the start at the lake. Took him a 10 minutes walk down there. So he walked to the west toward where the creek bed is at. He didn't see any deers and that he hears birds chirping and small animals like squirrels, Saturn, and all that. So he continued walking. He wasn't looking for small prey or ducks cracking in the lake or the geese or swans and that. So he went and got to the creek and turned northward the way back where his grandfather's cabin was at. The creek back there at the lake was kind of large where he can't cross. So he went up a few minutes until he found a fallen log over the creek bed. So he crossed the creek using that log. Even though it was slippery, he made sure he didn't fall in. As he continued stalking silently, stopping each time to hear the sound of the deer. So no sounds coming through yet. As he continued a few more minutes going north after crossing the creek, stopping a few times to listen, all he could hear was the birds and that. As he looked around, silently looking around his surroundings, looking for his prey, the deer that he wanted. Still no deer shows up. He saw a bobcat and it took off. He don't that bobcat don't want to mess with humans. They're interested in small prey. As the as he continues walking, he thought he heard something to his left. So he stopped and listened and heard branches breaking to his left. So he silently stalked through the woods as he walked around bushes and that, trying to find where the sound come from. He stopped to listen again to hear where the sounds coming from. Then he heard crackling to his in front of him to his left, so he headed towards that sound. He slowly creeping through the bushes, intent of finding what's making that sound. As he got closer to where that sound was, he stopped and looked to his right. There's an open field in the woods. He didn't see anything unusual, but of course, the reeds and wild grass and flowers and that were so grown tall, and the bushes and that he couldn't see if there's anything hidden there. So he walked around trying and stop because he can't hear the noise. So he's waiting to look around. Then he heard the noise again of cracking branches and the noise of the grass being separated and all that. So he looked towards where the sound he see movement of the grass where something was moving through the tall grass. Some of the grass and twigs that went flapping back up, but some places was kind of pushed down. So he went to investigate what was that thing is in that field that's making that grass flatten and all that. So he walked through the tall grass and all that toward the start of the flattening. He didn't see anything as he looked. So he looked at the other end of where the flashing glass, but he couldn't see or hear anything anymore. So he was starting to step into the word flattened and bend down to check the grass flatten what's causing it. He looked up and saw something glittering at the other end of the flattened grass. So he went over to investigate it, and what when he got there, he saw something watery like at the other end. To him, it looked small, but as he reached down, touch it, he realized that the substance was not flat on the ground like usually water and all that is. He didn't know what it is. What is it? And all that. So he don't know what to do next. So he's thinking, what should I do? Should I get a sample of it and take it with me, or what? And Edo thinking and all that, and and then he saw that kind of silver, like Jello. He was going, what is that? I never seen anything that moves like that except for what you eat. Then he noticed that it got taller as he go. He got up and backed away from it, but as he did, he felt something underneath his feet, around his back of his ankle, and tripped him. As he fell on his back, all of a sudden, the gel-like substance engulfed him. And nobody knows, haven't seen or heard from him ever again. It's that thing in the woods, we don't know what it is. What do you think that creature is, Melinda? Yeah. I I create lots of creatures in my fantasy books and all that. Yeah, you probably wonder away right away, huh, Melinda? The- Some creatures that I create it in my fantasy stories is like a lamb dog. Hey, Tails, how you doing? The lamb dog that I create in fantasy tale. It's kind of like a dog-like creature that that looks like a lamb. So I call it a lamb dog. Um, there's other stories that created created like monster fish, like catfish, sea creatures, sea monsters, things like that. A cave monster that's like um, sea monsters like cave monsters. And hey, Mo, happy Halloween. Mo. Um, Cave monsters that's almost like the blob. They are larger stories, books. Okay. See you, Melinda. Um, have a nice night. Uh, there are some creepy, spooky true life stories out there too. Um, get out of here, moss, and all that. Uh, there's a story of a doctor. Momo. Um, there's a true story that I heard, which I would watch on histories at the museum, things like that, about a doctor. Um, he he made a promise to the parents of a young lady that he he will kill the or kill cure the young lady of her disease because because she was dying from that disease and there was no cure. He was giving her parents false hopes because he fell in love with her. When she died, the doctor raided her tomb, wrap her, kind of dress her up and all that, to make her his wife. It wasn't until years later that the the parents of the young girl noticed that her body was missing from the tomb. So they investigated it, and one day her sister visited that doctor, and what the doctor let her in and showed her her sister lying on the bed all made up, that he was trying to preserve her almost like a mummy-like state. This agreement went to the authorities and he was arrested. The young lady was properly buried in her tomb where she could rest in peace, while the doctor was put away. But it's 12:02 a.m. my time, Mo. The doctor spent some time in prison for it. When he got out, he moved to a retirement place where he made up a mannequin that looked like the young lady that he was in love with. Years went by, and then a neighbor who haven't seen him around in a few days went over to his place to check on him and smelled something coming out of his house like dead flesh. So, see, that person investigated him and see what's going on and saw his dead body on the floor. And authorities were called. It's a sad ending for the girl, and sometimes lust can kill you. Let me see what's... The case of there's a true case of a guy who was abducted by a Bigfoot. Albert Ostman, who was born in 1893 and died in 1975, was a Canadian prospector who reported that he was abducted by a Sasquatch and held captive for 6 days. He stated that the event took place near Toba Inlet, British Columbia in 1924. Albert Ostman, a lumberjack and woodsman, went to the area for a vacation. Ostman had heard stories about the man-beast who supposedly roamed these woods, but refused to believe them. As Ostman lay asleep one evening, a Sasquatch purportedly picked him up and carried him off while he was in his sleeping bag. Ostman was carried in his sleeping bag across country for 3 hours by the Sasquatch. The Sasquatch dropped Ostman down on a plateau. Standing around him was a family of 4 of the creatures. Albert was kept captive by the Sasquatch. The captors were 2 adults and 2 children, which held Ostman captive for 6 days. One of the Bigfoots was reported as being 8 feet tall. Ostman did not use his gun on them, as they had done him no harm. He stayed with the Bigfoot family for a week. Osmond ate sweet tasting grass that they gave him. According to Osmond, the female Sasquatch lost and stacked leaves. Albert escaped by making the large male Sasquatch groggy by feeding him some snuff. He did not tell his story for more than 24 years after it happened for fear of being thought of as crazy. As more Sasquatch stories appeared in the press, Albert decided to tell his story to a local newspaper in 1957. In 2007, the skeptic Joe Nickell characterized the story as more likely the result of imagination than of recollection. Critics of Osmond note that they did not make this event public until 1957, 33 years after he said it took place. Primatologist John Napier states that Osmond's story fails to convince primarily on the grounds of the limited food resources available. Bigfoot researcher Peter Byrne cannot accept Osmond's story without more evidence. That was the Osmond Bigfoot story that I read about back in when I did the Bigfoot. Live stream. Others, let me see. You still Yoshio Warhorse. Okay, this one is the fascinating history of the haunted lemp mason, LEMP. In the 19th century, the Lemp family was practically royalty in St. Louis, Missouri. John Adam Lemp had introduced Lager beer to St. Louis in 1838 with the opening of his brewery in what is now Benton Park, and although his more famous rival, Anheuser-Busch, would eventually overtake Lemp beer in nationwide sales in the 1880s. Lemp outsold Anheuser-Busch in St. Louis. The family bought a beautiful mansion near the brewery at 3322 South 13th Street. Now, the main place. The family very well, practically William Jr., who married Lillian Hanlon, a railroad supply heiress called the Lavender Lady because of her preference for that color. Her horses' harness were even adorned in that particular shade. Their divorce 10 years after they were married was the talk of the town and scandal of the decade. But all was not well in the family, even though their business was thriving and they were treated like kings and queens everywhere they went in the city. In 1901, William Lemp Sr. lost his son, Frederick, who had a heart problem, and 3 years later, he shot himself with 38 caliber revolver in his bedroom in a Lemp mansion. After his father's death, William Jr. turned the mansion into the company's headquarters upon assuming the reins of the company, and all was well for a spell. But then Prohibition hit the United States, which spelled doom for the Lemp family. On March 20th, 1920, Elsa Lemp Wright, a daughter of William Lemp Sr. shot herself in her home on Tony Horton's place. This is the Lit family for you, William Jr. is reported to have said when he arrived at the scene. In 1922, William Jr. announced he would sell the property, and on December 29th of that year, he dismissed his secretary from his office and shot himself in the heart. The family did not sell the property and instead restored it as a residence, even after reign as the Bear Empire ended due to prohibition. But the tragedies in the house did not end there. In 1949, but the tragedy in the house did not end there. In 1949, Charles Lemp, William Jr.'s brother, shot himself in the same room as his brother had. In case I am found dead, blame it on no one but me, he wrote cryptically to his suicide note. Yeah. After Charles' death, the mansion was sold and turned into a boarding house. It was not well maintained, but this wasn't the only reason it was difficult to keep tenants. The building also had a reputation for being haunted, with phantom footsteps and knocks being heard, not uncommon. But St. Lucian Dick Pointer saw this slight issue of the building being haunted as an opportunity, and in 1975 he purchased the building to turn it into a restaurant and inn. It was difficult to keep staff sometimes because they would report seeing apparitions and odd sounds and would sometimes feel as though they were being watched. Those who work in the restaurant have heard the piano playing itself and doors locking and unlocking themselves. That's the story of the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis. If I could visit Maria, we could collab to go there and check that out. Okay. Here's the story of the Villisca axe murders in Villisca, Iowa. Long before serial killers and mass murders had become a way of life, 2 adults and 6 children were found brutally murdered in their beds in this small Midwestern town of Villisca, Iowa. During the weeks that followed, life in this small town changed drastically as residents of this small town reinforced locks, openly carried weapons, and huddled together while sleeping. Newspaper reporters and private detectives flooded the streets. Accusation, rumors, and suspicion ran rampant among friends and families. Bloodhounds were brought in. Law enforcement agencies from neighboring counties and states joined forces. Hundreds of interviews filled thousands of pages, and yet the murders remain unsolved. The murderer unpunished. In 1994, Darwin and Martha Lynn of Corning, Iowa, purchased the former home of murder victim J.B. Moore and his family. The house was returned to its original condition at the time of the murders on June 10, 1912. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places and open for tours. Films and books on the murders have recently captured the interest of an audience who had never heard of this horrendous crime. Psychics claim they verified the murderer, and history buffs continue collecting piles of documents they say point to the truth. In all honesty, though, we will never really know what happened on that dark night inside the home of JB and Sarah Moore. The murderer or murderers were never caught, and given the many years that have passed, their dark secret was obviously carried with them to their own graves. For some, the speculation was almost too much to bear. In the 1912, townspeople began to distinguish and identify themselves by who they believed committed the crime. Friendships became strained and, in many cases, irretrievably broken. The town stood then, and in many cases still stands, divided. The pain of the unknown, the pain of the terrible tragedy that forced neighbors to look with suspicion upon neighbor, the pain of the 20th century. The dates, June 9th and 10th, 1912. Lena and Dillinger, the daughters of Joseph and Sarah Dillinger, left their home for church early Sunday morning. They planned on having dinner with their grandmother at the morning service, spending an afternoon with her, and then returning to her home to spend the night after the Children's Day exercise concluded. The girls, however, were invited by Catherine Moore to spend the night at the Moore's home instead. Prior to leaving for the exercise, Mr. Moore placed a call to the Stillinger home to ask permission for the girls to stay overnight. Blanche, Lena, and Ina's older sister told Miss Moore that her parents were both outdoors, but she would pass the message along to them. The Children's Day program at the Presbyterian Church was an annual event and began at approximately 8 p.m. on Sunday evening, June 9th. According to witnesses, Sarah Moore coordinated the exercises. Of the Moore children, as well as the Salinger girls, participated. Josiah Moore sat in the congregation. The program ended at 9:30 p.m., and the Moore family, along with the Salinger sisters, walked home from the church. They entered their home sometime between 9:45 and 10 p.m. The following morning, at approximately 5 a.m., Mary Peckham, the Moore's next-door neighbor, stepped into her yard to hang laundry. At approximately 7 a.m., she was that not only had the Moores not been outside, nor the stores began, but the house itself seemed unusually still. Between 7 and 8 a.m., Mary Peckham approached the house and knocked on the door. When she received no response, she attempted to open the door only to find it locked from the inside. After letting out the Moore's chickens, Mary placed a call to Joshua's brother Ross Moore, into place one of the most mismanaged murder investigations ever to be undertaken. Based on testimonies from Mary Peckham and those who saw the Moors at the Children's Day exercise, it is believed that sometime between midnight and 5 a.m., an unknown assailant entered the home of J.B. Moore and brutally murdered all occupants of the house with an axe. Upon arriving at the home of his brother, Ross Moore attempted to look in the bedroom window and then knocked on the door and found attempted to raise someone inside the house. When that failed, he produced his keys and found one that opened the door. Although Mrs. Peckham followed him onto the porch, she did not enter the parlor. Ross went no further than the room of the parlor. When he opened the bedroom door, he saw two bodies on the bed and dark stains on the bedcloth. He returned immediately to the porch and told Mrs. Peckham to call the sheriff. The two bodies in the room downstairs were Lena Dillinger, age 12, and her sister Ina, age 8. Houses of the Moore children. The remaining members of the Moore family were found in the upstairs bedrooms by City Marshal headquarters, who arrived shortly. Every person in the house had been brutally murdered. Their skulls crossed as they slept. Joshua Moore, age 43, Sarah Montgomery, age 39, Herman Moore, age 11, and Catherine Moore, age 9, Boyd Moore, 7, and Paul Moore, 5, as well as the Dillinger sisters. And I bet that that place could be. Yeah, yeah, it is strange. They still haven't solved the crime. That that could possibly be because it could have been somebody in that town, and a lot of people were accusing each other. Back from what it said, I wonder if that place could be haunted too, or residue of activity. Probably be good place to take a spirit box out and see what's there, but we don't know. It's probably been so long ago. Yeah, yeah, it could be haunted. Never heard of it being haunted though. I guess everybody wished they were there. They say Lazy Boarding's house is haunted. Yeah. It would, yeah. If we could get a spirit box or something there, we could find out what was what is there and all that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If it's yeah, they and sometimes they take some of these films about true true stories and make things look haunted too, like they did with the independent movie a few years back called or John Wayne Gacy, his house being haunted by his ghost. Yeah, sometimes movies make things not true at times too on these things. So, yeah. Oops, I closed. Um, there's lots of stories about children disappearing. Um, there's some ghost stories on Reddit. Read those. The haunted doll. When you think of a haunted doll, it's likely the creepy old Victorian looking porcelain kind that springs to mind. None of which you probably have laying around. Still, don't get too comfortable around any kids' toys too soon. Though a Disney's Frozen Elsa doll that was gifted for Christmas in 2013 in the Houston area made headlines earlier this year when it suddenly became haunted. The doll recited phrases from the movie Frozen, saying, "Let it go," when a button on its necklace was pressed. For 2 years, it did that in English. Mother Emily Madonia said in 2015 it started doing it, alternating between Spanish and English. There wasn't a button that changed these, it was just random. The family has owned the doll for more than 6 years and never changed its batteries. The mother says the doll would randomly begin to speak and sing even with its switch turned off. The family decided to throw the creepy doll out in December 2019. Weeks later, they found it inside a bench in their living room. The kids insisted they didn't put it there, and I believed them because they wouldn't have dug through the garbage outside, Madonia told the area Houston News. At that point, Elsa ceased to sing the English rendition of Let It Go altogether, speaking only Spanish when pressed. The family then double bagged the bizarre doll, placed it at the bottom of the garbage, which was taken out on garbage day. They went on a trip shortly after, but when they returned, Elsa too had come back and was waiting in the backyard of their home. This time, the family mailed Elsa to a family friend in Minnesota who taped the haunted doll to the front bumper of his truck. It doesn't seem to have made its way back to Houston yet, as per Madonia's latest February Facebook update on the creepy doll. Yeah, yeah. Can you have anybody ever seen a Disney doll become a haunted doll? Yeah, yeah. People people are afraid of the clown dolls, but now they're have been afraid of the other dolls now. I'm not sure about the fidelity of that story because if it's true or not, because nobody haven't checked that doll out who's an expert in the paranormal field. What do you think about the Elsa doll being haunted? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the movie about Annabelle, the doll, they made it more like porcelain, but the actual doll was like a Raggedy Ann type doll. So, so, um, what was I saying? It seems that the different types of haunted dolls could be, or possessed dolls. Yeah, a lot of dolls could be difficult type of materials. If we had a haunted doll, I would probably burn it too, Warhorse. A deadly exorcism. In August 2016, in North London, 26-year-old Kennedy Ify began acting strange and aggressive following a pain in his throat. He reportedly bit his father, threatened to cut off his own you know what, and complained of a python or snake inside of him before his family restrained him to a bed with cable ties and excessive force. The, the family then said that about attempting to cure Kennedy through restraint and prayer over the next 3 days, the court was told. His brother, Colin, told police, "It's clear that thing was in him. We believe was a demon because it was not natural. It was clearly trying to kill him," he said. "We had to restrain him for himself. It was clear if we didn't restrain him, he could have tried to harm people in our family." Kennedy had been bound to his bed for 3 days without medical attention when his brother called emergency services, explaining that Kennedy was complaining of dehydration. He appeared to have developed breathing issues and was pronounced dead at 10:17 a.m. While the police were at the house, Colin allegedly carried out an attempted resurrection by chanting and praying for Mr. Effie. All 7 of Kennedy's life family members were accused of manslaughter, false imprisonment, and causing or allowing the death of a vulnerable adult. A post-mortem examination revealed over 60 wounds, including possible bite on Kennedy's body, and his father, Kenneth, along with 4 of his brothers, sustained injuries as well. Kenneth told jurors he ordered his sons to take shifts and use overwhelming force, but denied that an association with occults and secret societies played any part of the death. After a 4-day jury deliberation, all 7 family members were cleared of charges on March 14, 2019. If Yeah, if they was going to do an exorcism of somebody, they should have gotten a priest. Because if you don't know what to do, if you don't have any experience, they said there wasn't a cult or a cult or any secret societies. They just said that he was acting strange and was harming himself and other people. Yeah. Of course, Kennedy could probably have some mental issues too. They should check with the doctor first, check with the shriek, and if it's nothing like that, then they should go to a priest, Catholic priest, or something that deals with it. That's what they think, possessed by a demon or something. It sounded like Kennedy was more mutilated himself from what they're saying. So, yeah, because if you're some of these people that do these things are religious, into religious faith so badly that they think it's a demon all the time, but it could be cured through medical treatment or that. We don't know if it's a demon possession because they never said he was speaking rare. Uh, the death of Elisa Lamb. Elisa Lamb was last seen on January 31st, 2013, in the lobby of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. She was vacationing through the West Coast, documented the trip on her blog, and checking in with her parents every day. On January 31st, those calls stopped. Lamb had vanished. Soon the police were involved, and her parents arrived to help with the search. They had nothing. That February, LAPD released elevator surveillance footage of Lamb before her disappearance. The footage showed Lamb behaving strangely in the elevator, appearing to talk with invisible people, peering around the corner of the door, crouching in the corner, and opening and closing the door. But what exactly is going on in the video raises more questions than answers. Theories range from psychotic episodes to demonic possession to unknown assailants just out of the camera's view. Around that time, hotel guests started reporting weird things happening with the Cecil Hotel water supply. The sour was awful since Sabina Bog, who spent 8 days there during the investigation. When you turned the tap on, the water was coming back first for 2 seconds, and then it was going back to normal. The tap water tasted horrible, Bob said. It had a very funny, sweety, disgusting taste. It's a very strange taste. I can barely describe it. But for a week, they never complained. We never thought anything of it, she said. We thought it was just the way it was here. On the morning of February 19th, a hotel employee climbed to the roof and used a ladder to investigate the hotel's water storage tank. That's where authorities found the decomposed and naked body of Lamb, whose personal items were found nearby. After autopsy, her death was labeled accidental. NBC Los Angeles reported at the time about the strange surprise in the hotel's past. The tank has a metal latch that can be opened, but authorities said access to the roof is secured with an alarm and lock. The single room occupancy hotel was an unusual history. Night Stalker Richard Ramirez, who was found guilty of forcing slaves in the 1980s, lived on the 14th floor for several months in 1985. And international serial killer Jack Unterweger is suspected murdered 3 prostitutes during the time he lived there in 1991. He killed himself in jail in 1994. In 1962, a female occupant jumped out of the out one of the hotel's windows, killing herself and the pedestrian on whom she landed. In February 2021, a Netflix doc called Crime Scene, the management at the Cecil Hotel, explores Elisa's tragic case and the history of the Hearst Cecil Hotel. Yeah. Yeah, that motel is, I think they used the Cecil Hotel as a backing for American Horror Story. The one that one season with Lady Gaga on the show. And I think they used Richard Ramirez as one of the spirits as guests of the hotel. So yeah, they uh, yeah, it was American Horror Stories was weird. After that season, everything kind of jumped the chart a bit. Let me see. The Watcher. After moving to their $1.3 million dream home, a New Jersey family started receiving creepy death threats from people who identified themselves as the Watcher. Since moving in, the owners said they have received numerous letters from the mysterious person. The Watcher claimed the home has been the subject of my family for decades, and I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming, Castro reported. The new orders has several children, and other letters has have they found out what's in the walls yet? And I am pleased to know our names now and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. The family were forced to flee from their home and later filed a lawsuit against the previous owners. Hey, Misty. Yeah, that I would be upset if you receive calls and creepy letters saying stuff like that. I would flee. Okay. And well, here's the story of the mermaids. The myth of a marine human extends as far back as 5000 BC, when the Babylonians worshipped a fish-tailed god named Oannes. John Aston, author of Curious Creature in Zoology, proposes that this is the first depiction of a merman. Also in classical antiquity, Etruscus, chief goddess of the northern Syria, was depicted as a fish-bodied human. In the church centuries that followed, many people claimed to actually see mermaids. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed out from Spain with a mission to find a western trade route to Asia. Instead, he found something altogether more mysterious. On January 9, 1493, near the Dominican Republic, Columbus spotted three mermaids. He wrote, "They are not as beautiful as they are painted. Since it submarines, they have a face like a man." In 1608, during the expedition to discover the Northwest Passes, Henry Hudson claimed that several crew members spotted a mermaid from the navel upward. She was like a woman with long black hair, but she had a tail like a porpoise. So they Greek mythology and all that, and explorers, especially on ocean navigation, spot these mermaids. But not all mermaids were uh, always represented central like a good way, like the Little Mermaid. Disney, the 13th century Doratian manuscript describes. I can't pronounce the name of the manuscript. Describe a tailed beast with shoulders but no hands that raises from the water, saying whenever the monster has sold itself, men have always been sure that a storm would follow. Bernard Hoverman studied cryptozoology, the process by which unknown animals become monsters, or monsters are identified as known animals. He wrote that the mythifying process can sometimes be carried to the point of altering its substance beyond recognition. Case in point, the manatee. Since the manatee has spectral mammae and a body that tapers to a fish-like tail, it has always been identified on both sides of the Atlantic with the fascinating mermaid, despite its, to our eyes, ugly face. The three mermaids that Columbus spotted in 1493, or science as he called them, were undoubtedly manatees. He had many explorers after him determined that these aquatic mammals were mermaids in flesh and blood. Scientists of Dugons, a member of the manatees order, have also been associated with mermaids throughout history. Indeed, the order contained manatees and dugongs today is called Ceratidae. The the mermaids, and sometimes in Greek mythology, the sirens. Yeah. Okay, Warhorse. Take care. Um, sometimes in Greek mythology, mermaids were kind of like the sirens. They lead sailors to their death or men to their death. And sometimes the horror stories of these is so um the sirens or mermaids are that it's kind of like almost all the sirens lure man to their death. The banshee rated screams pronounce death in a year of certain people, things like that. The horror of these stories is kind of bad, you know. But sometimes mistaken identities. Now we have the knowledge. We could debunk some of these stories and myths and that as mistaken identity of real creatures. Now, uh, as we see the history of tales, especially true tales and all that, uh, like each thing gets passed down throughout history and it changes. The case of act the Valeska axe murder mystery in the house, how many of the details been passed down along people telling the story? Something change over time. And a lot of these stories, true stories, sometimes mimic other people who have these same stories, like the Watcher or missing children, things like that, or Bigfoot. Not all the Bigfoots are the same stories, but one set of Bigfoot, like the Albert Ostman kidnapping, is different from a story of a woman in Europe adopted by a Bigfoot type creature. That ultimate incident was that those Bigfoots were friendly to him, to his story. But the case of that one woman that escaped said that Bigfoot mistreated her. Yeah. And that this is what can't believe. I think it's it's kind of hard to explain. She said that the Bigfoot forced her and she gave birth to several of his kids. Is it really Bigfoot or just some men who are just hairy? So, in some cases, people said some of these creatures are aggressive, and others, like Osman, said they're not aggressive. I guess it's type of, yeah, it is weird. I, I think a lot of people have doubt about that. Uh, and as we, in a lot of these cases, um, hold on. Okay, they settle down. Yeah, because like what me and Warhorse talked about before. Yeah, there are good and there's evil, and then there's neutral that could be balancing of good and bad. Because those those are the ones that shy away from people more often. Um, Throughout history, there have been cases like the axe murders and that, and they blame it on, you know, like on the spirits, demons, banshees, you name it, creatures or goblins or ghouls or brownies or stuff like that. There, uh, throughout history, um, murder, crime sprees, axe murders happen all the time. But now, throughout history, to, to this day, yeah, yeah, throughout history, we kind of change stuff up. Now we report these axe murders or mass murders and that by calling them human beings who do murder. So, and sometimes, yeah, yeah, provoke. I would not provoke any creatures. And, and provoke is one thing to do. Probably giving them gifts, probably so peace, probably help. But then some people say you should not feed the animals or anything like that because you you would domesticate them. We don't know what if Bigfoot is a human or not. Yeah. Well, I guess that's all the storytelling for tonight. What do you think of all the stories and cases that I brought up? I know Melinda think that my first two stories that I told, yeah. Thank you, Night Stalker. Okay, I guess this is the end of the night. I'll probably do some sort of videos doing reading some of these stories thoroughly, like that Hoffman case and all that. So you all have a safe night and sleep well. Don't get the nightmares riled up. Is Yeah, you too, Light Stalker. Light so solstice, not anybody else who came in. And thank you all. Have all good night and catch you the next time. I'm going to be doing live later on the Hellhounds. If my sinuses don't act up. Night all.